Hazel Foster, 28, had spent her entire life trying to be family enough for her parents. From missing her dance recitals to forgetting her college graduation, Richard and Diane had always made it clear that her brother Calvin was their priority. But nothing prepared her for that Sunday dinner when her father smirked and pointed to the renovated room near the kitchen. "Sorry, this room's for family only," he said without a hint of remorse. What happened next would finally break the chains of emotional manipulation that had defined her existence. Before I dive into this deeply personal story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of resilience and growth. Now, let's explore how I finally found the courage to stand up for myself after years of emotional neglect. The drive to my parents' house always felt longer than the actual 20 minutes it took. Every mile closer to that colonial-style home in the suburbs added another knot to my stomach. I checked my watch. 5:28. I was early, as usual, for the mandatory 6 o'clock monthly family dinner that my parents, Richard and Diane Foster, insisted upon. "Just get through the next 3 hours," I whispered to myself as I parked my modest Honda Civic in the driveway, next to the empty spot where my brother's BMW would eventually be parked. Calvin was always fashionably late, a privilege I'd never been afforded. Growing up as Hazel Foster, the second child and only daughter of Richard and Diane, had been an exercise in invisibility. I'd spent 28 years trying to earn the love and attention that seemed to flow so naturally toward my older brother. Calvin, 32, the golden child who could do no wrong, even when he dropped out of college to find himself for 3 years or what he burned through his trust fund starting businesses that inevitably failed. I adjusted my blouse and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My curly brown hair was neatly styled, my makeup subtle but professional. As an accountant at Parker Financial Services, I'd worked hard to build a stable life for myself. My salary of $72,000 a year wasn't extravagant, but I'd managed to save $65,000 and maintained an excellent credit score. My one-bedroom apartment in the city was small but comfortable. I had built this life with zero help from my parents, who had paid Calvin's rent until he was 27. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother, her blonde hair freshly highlighted, wore her usual pearl necklace and disappointed expression. "Hazel, you're early again," she said, glancing at her watch. Not hello. Not "it's good to see you." Just a reminder that I'd somehow failed to follow an unwritten rule about arrival times. "Hi, Mom," I said, leaning in for a hug that was returned with a perfunctory pat on my back. The house smelled of pot roast and lemon furniture polish. My father sat in his recliner, watching a golf tournament. He barely looked up when I entered. "Hello, Dad," I said. Oh, Hazel, you're here." He nodded before returning his attention to the television. I helped my mother in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and setting the table while she talked about the neighborhood gossip and Calvin's latest venture, an app for dog walkers that he was very excited about. I nodded and made appropriate sounds of interest while thinking about the report I needed to finish for Kenneth Parker, my boss, by Monday morning. "Remember when Calvin won the regional science fair in 5th grade?" my mother asked, stirring the gravy. The judges said they'd never seen such innovation from someone so young. I remembered. I also remembered winning first place in the state math competition that same year, an achievement that warranted only a distracted, "That's nice, honey," from both parents. The doorbell rang at 6:45. My father jumped up from his recliner with an energy I'd never seen directed at my arrivals. "Calvin's here." My brother entered like a returning hero, carrying an expensive bottle of wine and wearing the confident smile of someone who had always been told they were special. 6 feet tall with our father's strong jawline and our mother's blue eyes, Calvin had the kind of presence that filled a room. "Sorry I'm late," he said, though no one had mentioned his tardiness. "Traffic was insane coming from the investor meeting." "How did it go, son?" my father asked, clapping him on the shoulder as they walked to the dining room. "They love the concept," Calvin said. "We're looking at a seed round of $500,000. My mother beamed. "I always knew you'd make it big." Throughout dinner, the conversation revolved around Calvin's app, Calvin's investors, Calvin's new downtown loft, and Calvin's recent vacation to Bali. I sat quietly, answering direct questions with brief responses, Knowing from experience that no one was particularly interested in my recent promotion or the fact that I'd been selected to lead a special tax optimization project for one of the firm's biggest clients. "So, Hazel," Calvin eventually said during dessert, perhaps noticing my silence, "what's new with you?" Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. "Oh, Hazel's doing the same as always. Still at that accounting firm." "Actually," I said, forcing myself to speak up, "I was promoted to senior accountant last month. I'm now leading a team on a major project." "That's great," Calvin said with what seemed like genuine interest. My father nodded distractedly. "Speaking of business, Calvin, have you thought more about that commercial property we discussed?" And just like that, the moment passed, and I was invisible again. When dinner ended, I offered to help with the dishes while Calvin and my father retreated to the den to discuss man stuff, as my father called it. I wanted to leave, to return to my apartment where at least I felt like I belonged, but some part of me still craved any morsel of approval I might get from staying to help. "You always were good at cleaning up," my mother said as I loaded the dishwasher, a backhanded compliment that summed up how they saw me. The reliable one, the responsible one, the one taken for granted. As I wiped down the granite countertops, I noticed several changes to the house since my last visit. The living room had new furniture, the hallway was freshly painted, and there were updated fixtures in the guest bathroom. "You've done some renovations," I commented as my mother put away the leftovers. Her face lit up, but not for me. "Yes. Richard and I decided it was time for some upgrades. Calvin helped us find a wonderful interior designer. Wait until you see what we've done upstairs." She led me through the house, pointing out new crown molding, recessed lighting, and an expensive Persian rug in the entryway. "And the master bath has been completely redone with Italian marble. It all looks beautiful," I said, genuinely impressed. "Must have been expensive." "Well, you know what they say. You can't take it with you." She laughed, waving away my practical concern about cost. As we passed back through the kitchen, I noticed a door near the pantry that seemed different. It had been a small storage closet where we kept seldom-used appliances and holiday decorations, but now it had a new door with a brushed nickel handle. "What about this room?" I asked, moving toward it. "Did you renovate it too?" My mother's expression changed subtly. "Oh, that's still in progress." My father and Calvin emerged from the den just as I reached for the door handle. "What are you doing?" My father's voice had an edge to it. "I was just curious about the renovations in here," I said, my hand falling away from the door. My father stepped between me and the door, a smirk spreading across his face that made my stomach tighten. "Sorry, this room's for family only," he said, his tone casual, but his eyes cold. The words hit me like a physical blow. "For family only." As if I wasn't family. My mother laughed, a high, nervous sound. "Richard, don't be silly. What he means, Hazel, is that we're converting it into a special home office and guest room for when Calvin comes to visit or needs to work from here. It's not ready to be seen yet." "Right," my father added. "It's going to be Calvin's space when he's here. A place where he can really feel at home." I fought to keep my expression neutral, though I felt like I'd been slapped. "I see," was all I could manage. Calvin shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, that's not. I mean, I didn't ask for." "Nonsense," my father interrupted. "You're here all the time helping us with tech issues and financial decisions. You need a proper workspace." My mother touched my arm. "You understand, don't you, Hazel? Calvin needs a dedicated space since he visits so often." I visited monthly too, but apparently that didn't warrant a family-only room. I thought about my childhood bedroom upstairs, which had been converted into a general guest room the year after I left for college. Calvin's room, meanwhile, had remained untouched for years, preserved like a shrine. "Of course I understand," I said, my voice hollow. "It makes perfect sense." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I nodded and smiled at appropriate intervals while feeling increasingly disconnected from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. When I finally said my goodbyes, no one tried to convince me to stay longer. Calvin walked me to my car. "Hey, that comment Dad made was out of line," he said, looking genuinely concerned. "I didn't ask them to make me an office or anything." "It's fine, Elite. I'm used to it." "You shouldn't have to be used to it," he said, but He didn't offer to confront our parents or refuse the special room being created in his honor. As soon as I pulled away from the house, the tears I'd been holding back began to fall. By the time I reached the highway, I was sobbing so hard I had to pull over onto the shoulder. With shaking hands, I called the one person I knew would understand. "Monica? It's me," I choked out when my best friend answered. It happened again. Monica Chun had been my roommate in college and remained my closest confidant. Unlike my parents, she saw me, really saw me. "What did they do this time?" she asked, her voice instantly concerned. I explained about the family-only room, barely getting the words out through my tears. "Oh, Hazel," Monica said softly. "I'm so sorry. That's incredibly hurtful." "Am I overreacting?" I asked, dabbing at my eyes with a tissue. "It's just a room." "It's not just a room, and you know it," Monica said firmly. "It's a symbol of how they've treated you your entire life. This isn't normal, Hazel. Parents shouldn't have favorites, and they definitely shouldn't be so blatant about it." Deep down, I knew she was right. This wasn't about a room. It was about a lifetime of being made to feel less than, of having to earn the love that was freely given to my brother. "I think maybe you should consider talking to someone professional about this," Monica suggested gently. "And maybe it's time to set some boundaries with your parents." Boundaries? The concept seemed foreign in relation to my family. Yes, boundaries. Like maybe skipping a few of these monthly dinners that leave you feeling terrible, or calling them out when they say hurtful things. The thought was terrifying. And yet, as I drove home to my empty apartment, I wondered what it would be like to stop seeking approval from people who seemed constitutionally incapable of giving it to me. "For family only," my father had said, and in that moment, something inside me had begun to crack. Not my heart, which had been broken by them many times before, but the chains of obligation and hope that had kept me coming back for more punishment, month after month, year after year. Maybe it was time to find out what family truly meant. "And how did that make you feel when your father said those words to you?" Dr. Eleanor Wells leaned forward slightly in her leather chair, her gray hair cut in a stylish bob that framed her kind face. She didn't take notes during our sessions, preferring to maintain eye contact, which I both appreciated and found intimidating. Like I was 6 years old again, I admitted. Like I was standing outside the door while they had a special family moment without me. It had been 3 weeks since the family-only incident, and this was my 4th session with Dr. Wells. Finding a therapist had been Monica's idea, and though I'd initially resisted, I finally made the appointment after another sleepless night replaying my father's smirk in my mind. "That's a very common reaction," Dr. Wells said. "When we experience hurt in adult relationships with our parents, it often reconnects us to childhood wounds." "But shouldn't I be over this by now? I'm 28, not 8. Dr. Wells smiled gently. "Hazel, the parent-child relationship is one of the most formative in our lives. The dynamics established in childhood don't simply disappear because we grow up, especially when those patterns continue to be reinforced." She helped me understand concepts like emotional neglect and golden child syndrome that gave names to experiences I'd always felt but couldn't articulate. Most importantly, she validated that my pain was real and justified. "Your father's comment was deliberately exclusionary," she said. "And your mother's explanation, rather than acknowledging the hurt, only reinforced the message that your brother's needs are prioritized over yours." "So what do I do now?" I asked. "That's entirely up to you," Dr. Wells replied. "But I would suggest beginning to establish some healthy boundaries, which might include limiting contact when it becomes harmful to your mental health." The idea of missing a monthly family dinner felt both liberating and terrifying. What would happen if I simply didn't go? I found out the following Sunday when I texted my mother an hour before I was expected to arrive. "Not feeling well today. Won't be able to make dinner. See you next month." The response was immediate. "We're counting on you to help set up. Calvin is bringing his new girlfriend, and we want everything to be perfect." Not "I hope you feel better." Not "we'll miss you." Just a reminder of my utilitarian value to the family. I turned off my phone and spent the evening with Ethan Rodriguez, the software engineer I'd been dating for 6 months. Unlike my family dinners, time with Ethan was easy, comfortable, and affirming. "You're allowed to take care of yourself," he said as we cuddled on his couch, watching a documentary about deep-sea exploration. "And for what it's worth, I think you made the right call. Ethan, with his warm brown eyes and quiet confidence, had been a revelation in my life. He listened when I spoke, remembered details about my day, and never made me feel like I had to earn his attention or affection. "Tell me more about this special project at work," he said, genuinely interested in my career in a way my family never was. I explained how Kenneth Parker, the managing partner at the firm, had personally selected me to lead a tax optimization strategy for Westridge Pharmaceuticals, one of our biggest clients. "That's incredible, Hazel," Ethan said, his eyes lighting up with pride. "They obviously see how talented you are." "It's a huge responsibility," I admitted. "I'm leading a team of 4 other accountants, including people who have been at the firm longer than me." "Because you're the best person for the job," Ethan said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Over the next few months, I missed 2 more family dinners, using work as an excuse. Each time, the guilt lessened a little. Instead of subjecting myself to my parents' subtle digs and blatant favoritism, I focused on building connections with people who actually valued me. Jasmine Williams, a fellow accountant at Parker Financial, became a close friend after we collaborated on the Westridge project. We started having lunch together regularly, and she invited me to join her book club. "You're exactly what this team needed," she told me one afternoon as we celebrated hitting a major milestone on the project. "Kenneth can't stop singing your praises in partner meetings." Monica and I strengthened our friendship with weekly yoga classes and Sunday brunches. "You seem different," she observed one morning as we shared a plate of blueberry pancakes. "More confident." "I feel different," I admitted. "Like I'm finally allowing myself to prioritize relationships that are good for me." Even my relationship with Ethan deepened. One evening, as we walked through a neighborhood of beautiful brownstones after dinner, he casually mentioned buying a home someday. "I've always wanted a place with character," he said, admiring a particularly charming building with bay windows. "Something that feels like it has history, you know?" "I've been saving for a down payment," I found myself saying. "Not for anything fancy, but somewhere that's truly mine." Ethan's hand tightened around mine. "Maybe someday we could find a place that's ours," he said, the comment casual but weighted with possibility. The thought was both exciting and terrifying, but not in the same way family dinners were terrifying. This was the good kind of fear, the kind that comes with growth and possibility. My phone rang later that night as I was getting ready for bed. Calvin's name flashed on the screen, surprising me. We rarely spoke outside of family gatherings. "Hazel? Hey, I just wanted to check on you. Mom and Dad are pretty upset that you've been missing dinners." I sat on the edge of my bed. Are they upset because they miss me, or because there's no one to help in the kitchen and listen to them talk about you all night? The silence on the other end told me everything. "That's what I thought," I said. "Look, I get it," Calvin said finally. "They can be a lot. But they're asking if you're coming next Sunday. They say they have something important to discuss with both of us." Did they say what it was about? Something about a family financial opportunity, whatever that means. Dad sounded unusually excited. I thought about saying no, about continuing to protect the peace I'd been building. But curiosity and that ever-present desire for parental approval won out. "Tell them I'll be there," I said, already wondering if I would regret it. 3 days before the scheduled family dinner, my father called. This in itself was unusual. My mother was typically the family communication hub. "Hazel, it's Dad." "Hi, Dad," I said, surprised by the warmth in his voice. He sounded almost friendly. "We've missed you at dinner, sweetheart. Your mother and I were just saying how quiet the house is without you." Sweetheart? He hadn't called me that since I was 10 years old. "I've been really busy with work," I said cautiously. Of course. We're so proud of your dedication to your career." This from the man who had once told me accounting sounded dreadfully boring and suggested I consider something more suited to women, like teaching. "Sunday's dinner is going to be special," he continued. "Your mother's making all your favorites. Lemon chicken, roasted asparagus, that chocolate cake you love. My favorite foods, which hadn't appeared at a family dinner in years." Something was definitely off. "Sounds great," I said, still wary. "Calvin mentioned you have something to discuss?" "Just an exciting opportunity we want to share with both our children," he said, emphasizing the word both in a way that felt calculated. "Nothing to worry about. We're just looking forward to having the family together again. When I shared the details of the call with Ethan that evening, he frowned. It sounds like they're buttering you up for something, he said. The sudden warmth, the favorite foods, the vague opportunity they want to discuss. I don't like it. Neither do I admitted. But I need to know what they're planning. Want me to come with you? Ethan offered. Moral support? The thought was tempting, but I shook my head. I think this is something I need to handle myself. But thank you for offering. Sunday arrived with clear skies and a knot of anxiety in my stomach. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar luxury sedan parked alongside Calvin's BMW. My mother answered the door wearing a dress I'd never seen before and more makeup than usual. Hazel, there you are. She hugged me with unexpected enthusiasm. We've been so looking forward to this. The house smelled amazing, the promised lemon chicken and other favorite dishes already prepared. The dining room table was set with the good china and crystal glasses that only came out for special occasions. My father emerged from the kitchen with a glass of wine in each hand. There's my girl, he said, handing me one of the glasses. We thought we'd start with a toast before dinner. Calvin arrived moments later, looking as confused by the warm reception as I felt. We exchanged glances as our parents fussed over us, pulling out chairs and serving food with a level of attention neither of us was accustomed to receiving. Throughout dinner, my parents asked detailed questions about my work, my apartment, and even my relationship with Ethan, showing more interest in my life than they had in years. Calvin kept giving me questioning looks, clearly as uncomfortable with this sudden change as I was. When dessert was served, my mother's homemade chocolate cake that I hadn't tasted since my 16th birthday, my father cleared his throat. Before we dig in, we have someone joining us for dessert. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times. Calvin, can you set this up on the TV screen? It's a video call. Calvin connected the phone to the television, and soon a professional-looking woman in her early 40s appeared on screen. Good evening, Foster family, she said with a bright smile. I'm Melissa Turner from Elite Reality Group. I understand you're all gathered to discuss the Oakwood Heights property. My father beamed. That's right, Melissa. Our whole family is here now. Wonderful. Let me share my screen to show you the virtual tour again. The image changed to show a sprawling Tudor-style home in what I recognized as Oakwood Heights, the most exclusive neighborhood in our city. Room by room, Melissa guided us through a house that featured cathedral ceilings, a gourmet kitchen, marble bathrooms, and a backyard with an in-ground pool and outdoor kitchen. As you can see, it's a truly exceptional property, Melissa concluded. 5 bedrooms, 4.5 baths, over 4,000 square feet of living space, and located in the top school district in the state. It's beautiful, I said automatically, still confused about why we were being shown this house. Isn't it, my mother gushed. Your father and I fell in love with it the moment we saw it. Wait, I said, the pieces starting to come together. Are you buying this house? My parents exchanged excited glances. We're ready for an upgrade, my father said. This house is everything we've always wanted. More space for entertaining, a proper home office, and of course, plenty of room for when you kids visit. But what about this house? I asked. You've lived here for 30 years. We'll sell it, of course, my mother said. The market is excellent right now. Something still didn't add up. My parents lived comfortably, but not extravagantly. My father had retired from his management position at a manufacturing company 3 years ago, and my mother had never worked outside the home. How could they afford a house in Oakwood Heights? The price seems like a great value for the neighborhood, Melissa was saying. At $1.2 million, it's actually below market for comparable properties in the area. $1.2 million. My stomach dropped. We'll let you finish your family discussion, Melissa said cheerfully. Just remember, we'll need to submit the financing paperwork by Wednesday to secure the property. There are other interested parties. After she disconnected, an uncomfortable silence fell over the dining room. So, I said finally, that's what this dinner is about. You're buying a $1 million house. $1.2 million, my father corrected, as if the distinction mattered. But we're putting down a substantial deposit, so the mortgage will only be around $290,000. That's still a lot of money, I said carefully. Are you sure this is the right financial move for retirement? My mother waved away my concern. Your father has it all worked out. It's a solid investment. Which brings us to why we wanted both of you here tonight, my father said, looking between Calvin and me. We need a small favor to make this happen. What kind of favor? Calvin asked, his voice wary. My father took a deep breath. Well, there's been a slight hiccup with our financing application. Nothing serious, just a temporary credit issue from when I co-signed for your business loan last year, Calvin. Calvin's face fell. Dad, I told you I'd handle the business loan myself. And you will, son. But in the meantime, the bank needs a little extra security on our mortgage. That's where you two come in. My stomach tightened as I began to understand where this was heading. We need one of you to co-sign the mortgage loan, my mother said, her voice sweet but her eyes calculating. Just as a formality, really. The bank wants an additional name on the paperwork because of your father's recent retirement. And the business loan situation, Calvin added, his tone flat. That too, my father admitted. But it's just a technicality. We'll make all the payments, of course. You won't have to worry about a thing. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. We thought of you first, Hazel. You've always been so responsible with money. Your credit score must be excellent with your accounting background. And there it was. The real reason for the sudden warmth, the favorite foods, the interest in my life. They needed my financial credibility to secure their luxury dream home. This is a lot to process, I said, carefully extracting my hand from my mother's grip. Co-signing a loan that size is a significant responsibility. Family helps family, my father said, the warmth in his voice now tinged with expectation. We'd do the same for you. But they wouldn't. They never had. Every milestone in my life, from college tuition to my first apartment, I had handled myself. Meanwhile, they had supported Calvin through multiple failed ventures and financial missteps. I'll need to think about it, I said finally. And I'd like to review the financial details before making any decision. Of course, my father said, though his smile had tightened. We have all the paperwork right here. The loan officer at First National Bank, Vincent Clark, can answer any questions you have. As they brought out folders of financial documents, I caught Calvin's eye across the table. His expression mirrored my own internal alarm. Beneath the chocolate cake and warm words, this dinner had been nothing but a carefully orchestrated manipulation. Absolutely not, Monica said emphatically when I called her the next morning. Please tell me you're not seriously considering this. I sighed, looking at the folder of financial documents my parents had insisted I take home. I don't know what to do, Monica. They were so nice last night, nicer than they've been to me in years. Because they want something from you, Monica replied, her voice gentle but firm. That's not genuine connection, Hazel. That's manipulation. Deep down, I knew she was right. The warmth had disappeared from my father's voice as soon as I hadn't immediately agreed to co-sign. My mother's goodbye hug had been noticeably cooler than her greeting. I made an appointment to speak with the loan officer today, I said, just to understand what I'd be getting into if I agreed. That's smart, Monica said. But promise me you won't sign anything without thinking it through completely. Vincent Clark, the loan officer at First National Bank, was a tall man with a receding hairline and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He reviewed the paperwork my parents had provided and frowned slightly. Miss Foster, I appreciate your diligence in coming to discuss this directly, he said after examining the documents. And I want to be very clear about what co-signing would mean in this situation. He explained that by co-signing the mortgage, I would be equally responsible for the full amount of the loan. If my parents missed payments, it would damage my credit score. If they defaulted entirely, I would be legally obligated to pay. Given the information I'm seeing here about your parents' current financial situation, I would characterize this as a high-risk commitment for a co-signer, he said carefully. There are several red flags in their recent credit history. What kind of red flags? I asked, my chest tightening. Vincent hesitated, clearly weighing his professional obligations against his concern for me. I can't share specific details about their application without their permission. But speaking generally, when we see multiple late payments, significant existing debt, and recent credit inquiries, it suggests potential financial instability. After leaving the bank, I sat in my car for a long time, trying to process what I'd learned. My parents had presented their credit issue as a minor technicality, but Vincent's warnings painted a very different picture. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I researched my parents' financial history. Using my accounting skills and some publicly available information, I discovered a pattern of refinanced mortgages, maxed out credit cards, and a home equity line of credit that was nearly depleted. They weren't just buying an upgrade. They were trying to escape a financial hole of their own making. You need to protect yourself, Dr. Wells said during our emergency session the next day. Co-signing this loan could devastate your financial future. But they're my parents, I said, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. Isn't family supposed to help family? Help should go both ways, Dr. Wells replied gently. From what you've told me, they've never offered you the kind of support they're now asking from you. They'll be so angry if I say no. Probably, she agreed. But consider this. Are you willing to risk your financial security for people who excluded you from a family-only room just a few months ago? The question hit me like a physical blow. For family only. The memory of my father's smirk as he blocked the door resurfaced, along with the lifetime of subtle rejections that had preceded it. When I returned to my apartment, Ethan was waiting with takeout food and a sympathetic ear. I showed him everything I discovered about my parents' finances. This is worse than I thought, he said, examining my notes. They're underwater on their current house and trying to upgrade to something 5 times more expensive? It doesn't make any sense. It makes sense if they're trying to keep up appearances, I said, a realization dawning. The fancy neighborhood, the luxury house, it's all about status. At your expense, Ethan pointed out. You know I'll support whatever decision you make, Hazel, but I'm worried about what this would do to you, financially and emotionally. My phone rang, Calvin's name appearing on the screen. I answered, putting it on speaker, so Ethan could hear. Hazel, have you made a decision yet? Mom and Dad keep calling me about it. I'm still thinking about it, I said. The loan officer told me some concerning things about their financial situation. Calvin sighed heavily. Yeah, I know. They asked me to co-sign first, actually. I said no. You did. I was surprised. Calvin rarely refused our parents anything. My business is finally starting to get traction, but it's still fragile. I can't risk my company's credit by taking on their mortgage. He paused. And honestly, Hazel, I don't think they can afford that house. So you turned them down, and now they're pressuring me instead, I said, the pieces falling into place. Pretty much. I'm sorry they put you in this position. He sounded genuinely remorseful. If it helps, I think you should say no too. After we hung up, Ethan looked at me with concern. Are you okay? I wasn't sure how to answer. On one hand, I felt validated knowing Calvin had also refused. On the other hand, the pressure was now squarely on me. For the next week, my parents called or texted daily. My father's messages grew increasingly urgent. The sellers are getting impatient. We need to move quickly on this opportunity. We'd do this for you, without hesitation. My mother took a different approach. We're so disappointed you don't trust us. After everything we've done for you. Calvin was going to help until his business situation changed. Each message twisted the knife of guilt a little deeper, making me question my own boundaries and judgment. Was I being selfish? Ungrateful? A bad daughter? They're using every emotional manipulation tactic in the book, Dr. Wells observed during our next session. The guilt, the urgency, the implied obligation, the comparison to your brother, these are classic pressure techniques. How do I make the guilt stop? I asked, exhausted from the constant internal battle. You can't control how they make you feel, Dr. Wells said. But you can decide whether to let those feelings drive your decision-making. As the pressure from my parents intensified, I found myself remembering other moments when they had manipulated me emotionally. The time they forgot to attend my college graduation but expected me to organize a huge party for Calvin's. The Christmas, when my gift was a blender while Calvin received a new laptop. The countless times my achievements were minimized while his were celebrated. We need your answer by tomorrow, my father said when he called on Friday. We're having a family dinner on Sunday to finalize everything. I'll be there, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. We can discuss it then. After hanging up, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed different somehow, her eyes clearer, her jaw set with determination. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The atmosphere at Sunday's dinner was tense from the moment I arrived. Gone were the warm greetings and favorite foods of the previous week. My mother barely looked at me as she served a hastily prepared casserole, and my father's smile didn't reach his eyes. Calvin arrived shortly after I did, giving me a supportive nod as he took his seat at the table. "Well," my father said once we'd all been served, "let's not drag this out. Hazel, have you made your decision about the house?" I placed my fork down carefully. "Actually, I brought some information I'd like to discuss first." I pulled out a folder containing financial projections I'd prepared, showing the true cost of the mortgage over time and the potential impact if payments were missed. "We don't need to see that," my father said dismissively. "This isn't a business meeting." "It is when you're asking me to take on $250,000 in liability," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "I spoke with Vincent Clark at the bank." My mother's eyes widened. "You went behind our backs to talk to the loan officer?" I needed to understand exactly what co-signing would mean for me, I explained. "And what he told me was concerning. Your current debt-to-income ratio is already problematic, and with Dad's retirement, your income is fixed." "That's our business," my father snapped. "All we need from you is a signature. You're overthinking this." "I'm being thorough," I corrected him. "This is what I do professionally, remember? Analyze financial risk." "Well, aren't you special?" my mother muttered. "Always thinking you're so much smarter than everyone else." "That's not fair," Calvin interjected, surprising me with his support. "Hazel's right to ask questions. This is a huge commitment you're asking for." My father ignored him, focusing his irritation on me. "Either you trust your family, or you don't, Hazel. It's that simple." "It's not about trust," I said, though of course it was in part. "It's about financial reality. This house is far more than you can reasonably afford, even with my help. We've raised you, clothed you, put a roof over your head," my mother said, tears welling in her eyes. "Is it too much to ask for your support now?" The guilt card. It might have worked a month ago, even a week ago, but therapy and distance had given me clarity. "I've been supporting myself entirely since I was 18, I reminded her. "My college tuition, my apartment, my car. I've never asked you for financial help." "Not everyone needs to be so independent," my father said coldly. Calvin understood the value of family support. "Don't drag me into this," Calvin said, his voice unusually firm. "I couldn't co-sign either, remember?" My father waved his hand dismissively. "Your situation is different. You're building a business." "And Hazel's building her career and financial future," Calvin responded. "The principle is the same." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. "I just don't understand why you won't help us. After everything we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, years of hurt suddenly pushing to the surface. "Excuse me?" My mother looked genuinely shocked. "I'm curious what you think you've done that entitles you to put my financial future at risk," I continued, surprising myself with my calm tone. "Because from where I'm sitting, I've been an afterthought in this family for as long as I can remember." "That's ridiculous," my father said, but his eyes slid away from mine. "We've always treated both our children equally." "Really?" I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Is that why Calvin has a family-only room in this house while my childhood bedroom was converted into generic guest space the minute I left for college?" My father's face flushed. "That room is for practical purposes. Calvin visits more often and needs a workspace." "I visit every month," I countered. "Or, at least I did until recently. The difference is that Calvin is treated like family, while I'm treated like an obligation." "You're being dramatic," my mother said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Am I? When was the last time either of you asked about my promotion? Or remembered my birthday, without me reminding you? Or showed any interest in my life beyond what I could do for you?" My father's expression hardened. "If you're going to be ungrateful about everything we've done for you, maybe we should just ask someone else for help with the house." "Good luck with that," I said quietly. "Because anyone who looks at your financial situation objectively will see what I see, a disaster waiting to happen." "After everything we've done for you," my father repeated, his voice rising, "this is how you repay us?" Something snapped inside me. Years of suppressed hurt and anger crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I stood up slowly from the dining table, my hands perfectly steady. "Not my house," I said, my voice calm but firm. Not my responsibility. What did you say? My father looked stunned by my defiance. I said no. I will not co-sign your mortgage. I will not put my financial future at risk for a house I'll never be truly welcome in. How dare you? My mother gasped. After everything we've sacrificed for you. What exactly did you sacrifice, Mom? You never came to my dance recitals. You forgot my college graduation. You've spent my entire life making it clear that Calvin is the only child you really wanted. That's not true, she protested, but her eyes darted toward Calvin guiltily. It is true, I continued, finally giving voice to feelings I'd suppressed for decades. Do you know what it felt like to hear Dad say that room was for family only? To be explicitly told that I don't count as family in my childhood home. I didn't mean it that way, my father muttered, though we both knew he had. Yes, you did. And it wasn't just that moment. It's been my entire life. The missed birthdays, the forgotten achievements, the constant comparison to Calvin. Every time I've tried to earn your approval, you've moved the goalposts. Calvin cleared his throat. She's right, you know. You've always treated us differently. My parents stared at him in shock, clearly unprepared for both their children to confront them simultaneously. I never wanted to see it, Calvin continued, because it benefited me. But watching how you've treated Hazel, it's not right. It never was. My mother's face crumpled. We never meant to make you feel excluded, Hazel. Intention doesn't change impact, I said, repeating a phrase Dr. Wells had taught me. And the impact has been years of feeling like I'm not enough, like I'm not really part of this family. Of course you're part of the family, my father said, but his tone lacked conviction. Then start acting like it, I replied. If you want a relationship with me going forward, things need to change. I won't be manipulated. I won't be guilt. And I definitely won't be putting my name on your mortgage. My father's face darkened. If that's how you feel, maybe you should leave. Richard, my mother gasped. No, I mean it, he continued, anger replacing his earlier charm. Either you're with this family, or you're not. Either you sign the papers, or you can forget about coming back here. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. 6 months ago, it would have devastated me, would have sent me scrambling to comply with whatever they wanted just to maintain my tenuous connection to my family. But I wasn't that person anymore. Then I guess I won't be coming back, I said, gathering my purse and the financial folder. Not until you can see me as a daughter worth respecting rather than a signature on a loan document. I walked toward the door, my heart pounding but my step steady. Hazel, wait, Calvin called, following me. I'll walk you out. Outside, the evening air was cool against my flushed skin. I felt lightheaded, almost dizzy with the enormity of what had just happened. That was incredible, Calvin said quietly. I've never seen you stand up to them like that. I've never stood up to them like that, I admitted. I'm not sure what happens now. Calvin squeezed my shoulder. Whatever happens, you did the right thing. And I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you more over the years. Thanks for backing me up in there, I said, genuinely grateful for his support, belated though it was. The drive home passed in a blur. When I finally pulled into the parking lot of Ethan's apartment building, where he was waiting for me, the emotional dam broke. I sobbed in his arms, releasing decades of pain and the fresh wound of my father's ultimatum. I might have just lost my family, I choked out between tears. No, Ethan said firmly, holding me close. You just stood up to people who never treated you like family should. There's a difference. As my tears subsided, exhaustion took their place. But beneath the fatigue and grief, I felt something unexpected, relief. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my truth without apology or qualification. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms. This one has great natural light, Ethan said, opening the blinds in what could potentially be our home office. And the built-in bookshelves are a nice touch. 6 months had passed since the confrontation with my parents. 6 months of therapy, of strengthening relationships with people who truly valued me, of learning what healthy boundaries looked like in practice. And now, Ethan and I were house hunting. The kitchen is smaller than the last place we saw, I observed, running my hand along the granite countertop. But I like the open floor plan. And it's within our budget, Ethan added. Always the practical one. No financial stretching required. We had been saving diligently, combining my $65,000 in savings with Ethan's $50,000 to create a solid down payment. The houses we were considering were modest but comfortable, nothing like the million-dollar showplace my parents had coveted. What do you think about the neighborhood? Our real estate agent, Sofia Garcia, asked as we explored the backyard. It's family-friendly, good schools, and only a 15-minute drive to both your workplaces. I like it, I said, imagining weekend barbecues and morning coffee on the small patio. It feels right. My professional life had flourished in the months since I'd established boundaries with my parents. The Westridge Pharmaceuticals project had been a resounding success, earning me a promotion to manager and a substantial raise. Kenneth Parker had taken me aside after announcing my new position. Your leadership on the Westridge project showed me exactly what you're capable of, he'd said. This promotion is well-deserved, Hazel. My relationship with Calvin had evolved too. Freed from our parents' dynamic of comparison and competition, we'd begun to build a genuine sibling bond. We met for coffee every few weeks, carefully avoiding discussion of our parents at first, then gradually processing our shared history as we grew more comfortable with each other. I always knew they favored me, he admitted during one of our conversations. But I told myself it was because I needed more help, or because you were more independent. I didn't want to see the unfairness because it benefited me. And I always believed I needed to earn their love, I replied. That if I was just perfect enough, responsible enough, they'd finally see me. You never needed to earn it, Calvin said. That was on them, not you. As for my parents, the estrangement had been difficult but necessary. They had tried calling repeatedly in the weeks after our confrontation, leaving messages that oscillated between guilt-inducing, "How could you abandon your family?" and minimizing, "You completely overreacted to a simple financial request." Following Dr. Wells' advice, I had responded with a brief email outlining the conditions under which I would consider rebuilding our relationship: acknowledgement of past behavior, commitment to change, and respect for my boundaries. Their response had been defensive and dismissive, making it clear they weren't ready for genuine reconciliation. Then, about 3 months after our confrontation, I'd received an unexpected email from my mother. "We've had to sell the house," she wrote. "The bank wouldn't approve our loan for Oakwood Heights, and we couldn't keep up with the payments on this one anymore. We're moving to a condo next month." I wish things had turned out differently. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of how their financial irresponsibility had led to this outcome, but it was the first communication that didn't attempt to blame me for their problems. A month later, Calvin reported that our parents had indeed downsized to a 2-bedroom condominium in a retirement community. My father had been forced to take a part-time job to supplement their income, and the experience of financial humbling seemed to be slowly changing their perspective. "Back to this house," Ethan said, drawing me out of my reflections. "What's your gut feeling?" I looked around the sunlit living room, trying to imagine our life here. It wasn't perfect. The bathrooms needed updating, and the basement was unfinished, but it felt like somewhere we could build a future together. "I think this could be home," I said. Our home. 2 weeks later, our offer was accepted. As we signed the mountain of paperwork at the closing, I couldn't help but contrast this careful, responsible purchase with my parents' reckless reach for luxury they couldn't afford. We moved in on a Saturday, with Monica, Jasmine, Calvin, and several other friends helping to carry furniture and unpack boxes. By evening, though the house was still chaotic with half-unpacked belongings, it already felt like home. "I propose a toast," Ethan said, raising a plastic cup of champagne in our kitchen surrounded by friends. "To Hazel, the strongest person I know, and to new beginnings." "To new beginnings," everyone echoed, and the warmth of genuine connection filled the room. The following weekend, as Ethan and I worked on setting up the second bedroom as a home office, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Hello," I answered, wedging the phone between my ear and shoulder as I assembled a bookshelf. "Hazel, it's Mom." I nearly dropped the screwdriver I was holding.
"Mom."
"Hi. Calvin told us you bought a house," she said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied, uncertain where this conversation was heading. "Your father and we've been doing some thinking, and some talking with a marriage counselor." She paused. "We'd like to see your new home, if that's something you'd be open to." I sat down on the floor, processing her words. The last time we spoke, Dad said I wasn't welcome back unless I signed those loan papers. I know, she said quietly. That was wrong. We were wrong about a lot of things. It wasn't a full apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd ever received from either of my parents. I'd need to think about it, I said carefully.
And talk to Ethan.
This is his home too. Of course, my mother replied. Just let us know. After careful consideration and discussion with Dr. Wells, Ethan, and Calvin, I decided to invite my parents for dinner the following month. The evening was awkward at times, with conversation occasionally stalling into uncomfortable silence, but there were also moments of genuine connection I'd never experienced with them before. As I showed them around the house, my father commented on the solid construction and Ethan's skilled carpentry in the kitchen updates. My mother brought a houseplant as a gift and asked thoughtful questions about our plans for the garden. When we reached the home office, I paused at the doorway, a small, petty part of me tempted to echo my father's cruel words from that day that had changed everything. Sorry, this room's for family only. But as I looked at my parents, now looking smaller and older in our modest but warm home, I realized I didn't need or want to inflict that pain in return. This is our home office, I said instead, opening the door wide. Ethan and I both work from home sometimes, so we wanted a space that works for both of us. My father nodded, his eyes taking in the dual desks, the bookshelves, the framed photo of Ethan and me on a hiking trip. It's a good use of the space, he said. Practical. As they prepared to leave after dinner, my mother hesitated at the door. I know we have a long way to go, she said softly. But I'm glad you invited us, Hazel. Me too, I replied, surprised to find I meant it. Recovery from a lifetime of emotional neglect wouldn't happen overnight. My parents might never be the warm, supportive parents I had longed for as a child. But as they drove away that evening, I felt a sense of closure that had nothing to do with their approval or validation. I had built a life filled with people who valued me for exactly who I was. I had established boundaries that protected my well-being and financial security. I had created a home where everyone was family, not just those who fit a narrow definition. In my living room, I hung a small wooden sign Ethan had made as a housewarming gift. It read simply, "Home is where you're valued." Looking around at the life we were building together, I knew I had finally found exactly that. Did you ever have to stand up to family members who were trying to take advantage of your generosity? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about setting boundaries and building healthy relationships. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to say, "Not my responsibility," sometimes. Thank you for joining me today, and remember that creating your own definition of family is sometimes the most powerful act of self-care you can choose.